"You're my ride, right?" she asked the quiet man in the rain. But hours later, he landed a helicopter to save her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain had been falling since dusk, turning the streets of Manhattan into mirrors of shimmering gold and blue. Under the awning of Terminal C, a young woman named Emma Brooks stood clutching her worn sketchbook, her coat soaked, her breath visible in the cold. She had just arrived from a late freelance job, her phone nearly dead, her ride nowhere to be found. The world felt too big and too busy for someone like her, a struggling artist who made a living drawing quick portraits in CAFs and selling small prints online. A black SUV pulled up beside her, sleek and silent. The driver door opened, and a tall man stepped out, holding an umbrella. His suit was immaculate, even in the rain. His face calm, unreadable. Without hesitation, Emma ran toward him and blurted out, "You are my ride, right?" The man paused, glancing at her for a moment before giving a slight nod. "Get in," he said quietly, his voice steady and low. She slid into the back seat, dripping water onto the leather interior, too cold and embarrassed to notice the detail, the dashboard lights, the faint smell of cedar and cologne, the absence of any rideshare logo. The car moved smoothly through the city, the sound of rain tapping gently against the windows. For a while, neither of them spoke. She watched the passing lights blur together, feeling a strange comfort in the quiet presence of this stranger. "Thank you for waiting," she said softly. He looked at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes calm but distant. "You are welcome." His tone carried weight, something she could not quite name discipline, perhaps, or loneliness. When the car stopped, she reached for her bag, ready to pay through the app, but her phone had shut off completely. "I am so sorry," she stammered. "I can pay you tomorrow." The man simply handed her an umbrella. "Stay dry," he said before driving away. Only when the car disappeared did she realize her sketchbook was still on the seat. Hours later, in a penthouse overlooking the city, the same man, Liam Parker, founder of Parker Innovations, sat by the window with her sketchbook in his hands. He flipped through the pages slowly, pausing at a sketch of a small girl holding an umbrella in the rain. On the corner of the page was a note in delicate handwriting. "Someday, I will paint something people will stop for." He closed the book and stared out into the storm. For a man who built an empire from precision and logic, something about those words unsettled him. It had been years since anything made him stop. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware that one small mistaken assumption in the rain had just set two worlds on a collision course. And for Emma Brooks, somewhere across town, that same mistake would soon change everything she thought she knew about kindness, power, and love. When we last saw Emma Brooks, she had just fled that elegant Manhattan restaurant, her cheeks burning from the realization that the man she had talked to for an entire hour was not her blind date. Now, let us go back to her story. The cold air outside bit against her skin as she ran through the drizzle, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. She could still hear her own voice replaying in her mind, that confident introduction that turned into the most embarrassing mistake of her life. She hailed a cab, clutching her coat to her chest, trying to disappear into the seat. At the same time, inside the restaurant, Liam Parker sat alone at the same table, staring at the empty chair she had left behind. He did not usually care about strangers, but something about her raw honesty and unpolished warmth lingered like a song he could not forget. That night, back in his penthouse, the city lights glittered below like shards of gold. His phone buzzed with messages from partners and assistants, but he ignored them. Instead, he found himself scrolling through the online reservation system, wondering if fate would ever let him see her again. Across town, Emma sank into the worn couch of her tiny apartment. Her roommate Jenny looked up from her laptop, her voice teasing but kind. "So, how did the big blind date go?" Emma groaned, pulling a throw pillow over her face. "Do not ask. I sat at the wrong table, Jenny. Talked to the wrong guy for an hour. He was nice funny, actually, but not the man I was supposed to meet." Jenny laughed softly. "Only you could turn a blind date into a comedy of errors." Emma peeked out from under the pillow, her cheeks pink. "I just hope I never see him again." But she would. The next morning, sunlight spilled through her cracked blinds, waking her to a reality that felt heavier than ever. The cafe where she worked was cutting hours, her rent was due, and the paint supplies for her side project her dream of one day opening a small art studio were still sitting unpaid in her online cart. As she poured coffee for a half-awake customer, she caught her reflection in the chrome of the espresso machine. Tired eyes, messy bun, a hint of a smile that refused to die. "At least I tried," she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, across the city, Liam walked into his office on the 42nd floor of Parker Innovations. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls, but his focus drifted. His assistant, Claire, noticed. "You canceled 2 meetings this morning. Are you feeling all right?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "I met someone last night. By accident." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Accident?" "She sat at my table thinking I was someone else. I should have corrected her, but—" He trailed off, surprising himself with the admission. "She was different. She did not care who I was." Claire smiled knowingly. "That might be exactly why you cannot stop thinking about her." Down at the cafe, the morning rush began to fade. Emma was cleaning a table when a man in a dark suit stepped inside. He looked familiar, but it took her a moment to realize who he was. Liam. Her breath caught, the memory of her humiliation flashing bright red in her mind. He noticed the recognition, the way her hand froze mid-wipe, and gave a small, apologetic smile. "Hi," he said simply, his voice calm, almost careful. "I think I owe you an apology for not saying the truth that night." She blinked, heart racing. "You? Here?" He nodded. "I wanted to return something." From inside his coat, he pulled out a small sketchbook, edges slightly bent, the one she had left on the table that night. "You left this behind." Emma's eyes widened. "Oh my God, I thought I lost it forever." She took it gently, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you. It was my pleasure," he said, his smile warm but guarded. "You draw beautifully." She laughed softly. "You looked through it?" "Only a little," he admitted. "I was curious about the girl who turned my evening upside down." For the first time since that night, she laughed a real, bright laugh that made Liam's chest tighten. The awkwardness between them began to fade, replaced by something quiet and honest. The bell above the cafe door chimed as another customer entered, and Emma stepped back behind the counter. "So," she said, trying to sound casual, "do you always track down strangers who embarrass themselves in front of you?" Liam chuckled. "Only the unforgettable ones." Emma's heart skipped, but she hid it behind a grin. Outside, the rain started again, light and steady against the windows. 2 people who should never have met stood on opposite sides of a coffee counter, both pretending not to hope for more. Neither of them knew that this small moment, the return of a lost sketchbook, would be the beginning of everything. The next few days passed like quiet ripples after a storm. Emma kept telling herself that the encounter at the cafe had been just a coincidence, a small episode in a city of millions. Yet somehow, every time she passed by the glass door, she half expected to see him again. Liam, however, had no intention of letting fate take all the credit. The morning after he returned her sketchbook, he found himself distracted in every meeting, the words of his team blending into background noise. That night, he stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The city stretched beneath him like a web of light. The sketch she drew, the one of the rain-soaked street with the single umbrella, was burned into his mind. It was simple, yet alive, just like her. 2 days later, Emma's cafe got a large catering order for an art auction at the Parker Foundation. She did not connect the name. It was just another delivery, another set of trays to carry and plates to refill. When she arrived, her sneakers squeaked softly against the polished marble floor of the museum. Guests in gowns and tuxedos filled the hall, their laughter echoing under the chandelier. She felt small but focused, setting cups and adjusting napkins. She did not see him until she turned around with a tray of pastries. Liam, standing near a painting, speaking with a curator. The sight froze her mid-step. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. He looked different here, more composed, surrounded by people who clearly knew his worth. She quickly turned away, pretending not to see him. But he saw her. His conversation paused, his gaze softening. He excused himself and walked toward her, his voice low and steady. "I was hoping I would run into you again." She tried to laugh it off. "Looks like I keep showing up where I do not belong." "You belong more than you think," he said quietly. Before she could respond, her manager called her to bring more coffee to the VIP section. She hurried off, heart racing. Later that night, as the event wound down, she stood near the service door, waiting for the last load of dishes. Liam appeared again, holding a folded napkin with something scribbled on it. "Before you disappear again," he said, offering it to her. On the napkin was a small drawing of her sketchbook with a coffee cup beside it, and the words, "Dinner Friday, 7 p.m. Same calf?" She stared at it, caught between disbelief and a laugh. "You drew this?" "Let's say I tried to keep up with your level." Emma bit her lip, trying to hide the smile forming. "I'll think about it," she said, tucking the napkin into her apron pocket. He nodded. "That's all I needed." He walked away before she could change her mind. That night, lying in her apartment, Emma unfolded the napkin again and again until the creases softened. Jenny teased her mercilessly but also whispered, "You deserve something good, Em. Maybe this time, just see where it goes." By Friday, she had convinced herself it was only dinner, nothing more. Yet when Liam arrived, casual in jeans and a dark sweater, she felt the air shift. They talked about everything: art, music, the small absurdities of daily life. No titles, no wealth, just two people trying to understand each other. Hours slipped by unnoticed. As the cafe closed, he walked her outside, the night cool and quiet. "I'm glad you sat at the wrong table," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled softly. "Me too, I think." The streetlight flickered, rain starting to fall again, light and familiar. For the first time in a long while, Emma did not rush to find cover. She simply stood there, letting the rain fall, unaware that this small choice to stay was the first step towards something far bigger than she could ever imagine. For the first time in years, Emma felt that the city did not swallow her whole. The Friday dinners became a quiet routine, something she both looked forward to and feared. Liam was always on time, always listening, and yet there was something behind his calm that she could not quite read. He never spoke much about his work. When he did, it was vague, just a few projects in tech, the same words he had said on the night they met. But one evening, when they were walking home under the streetlights, a man stopped Liam on the sidewalk. "Mr. Parker," the man said, surprised. "The board moved the meeting to Monday. Should I email you the revised figures?" Emma froze. Liam's name echoed in her mind. Parker. She had seen that name printed across headlines, on the building she passed every morning, the Parker Group. Liam Parker was not just some man who liked her drawings. He was one of the most powerful entrepreneurs in the city. He looked at her, realizing the truth had just dropped between them like a stone in still water. The air thickened. Emma's voice trembled. "You are that Parker?" He nodded slowly. "I was going to tell you, but I did not want that to be the first thing you knew about me." Her heart raced. The distance between them suddenly felt huge. "You let me think you were just a guy who worked in tech." "I am," he said softly. "That part was true. I just left out the rest." Emma stepped back, the rain glistening on her face. "You lied." "I kept one truth at a time," he said quietly. "Because for once I wanted someone to see me without the name." She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "You should have trusted me with the truth." She turned and walked away before he could stop her. That night, Emma lay awake staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment. Every memory replayed differently now: the quiet dinners, the small sketches, the coffee he always paid for. It all felt like a cruel test she had never agreed to take. Days passed. She threw herself into work at the cafe, ignoring the ache in her chest. Her phone buzzed with messages from Liam, but she never replied. One evening, as she was closing up, her manager handed her an envelope. "A courier dropped this off for you," he said. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key card. The note read, "Come see something. If you still think I lied, you will never have to see me again." L. Against her better judgment, curiosity won. The next day, she followed the address printed on the card to a quiet building downtown. Inside, she found a small art gallery. The walls were lined with framed sketches hers. Every page from her old sketchbooks, restored, printed, and signed under her name. In the center stood a sign. "The Emma Brooks Collection, a journey through kindness." A voice behind her said, "I wanted the world to see what I saw that night in the rain." She turned. Liam stood there. No suit, no boardroom power, just a man with tired eyes and hope in his smile. "You did all this?" she whispered. "For you," he said. "Because you reminded me that truth means nothing if it does not show through action." Emma blinked back tears. "You cannot just fix everything with grand gestures." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then, let me start with honesty. I fell in love with the woman who sat at the wrong table and made my world feel right. No titles, no contracts, just her. Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Emma looked around at her drawings, the rain, the streets, the faces she had imagined into hope, and realized they were not just sketches anymore. They were proof that even mistakes could become masterpieces. She exhaled, a soft laugh breaking through her tears. "You really do not know how to keep things simple, do you?" He smiled. "Not when it comes to you." For the first time since that night, she took his hand, and the city outside seemed to slow down. Somewhere far below, traffic hummed like a heartbeat, steady and alive. In that quiet space, between forgiveness and beginning, two people finally stood where they were always meant to know: rain, no secrets, just truth. The following weeks felt like sunlight after a long winter. Emma's small collection at the gallery began drawing attention, not because it was backed by the Parker name, but because it spoke to people. Her sketches of ordinary lives, coffee shop workers, street musicians, mothers waiting at bus stops, told stories of quiet resilience. Liam stayed beside her, not as a benefactor but as someone who believed in her work. He avoided grand gestures now, choosing smaller things instead, walking her home, bringing her coffee, listening to her talk about colors and emotions, as if every shade had a heartbeat. One afternoon, as the gallery prepared for its next showing, a journalist from an art magazine arrived. Emma stood nervously as the woman asked, "What inspired this exhibit?" Emma hesitated, glancing at Liam across the room. "A mistake," she said finally. "The kind that changes everything. Sometimes we meet the right person the wrong way, and sometimes the wrong way is exactly what we need." That quote made it into the headline. Within a week, invitations flooded in for her to display her work in other cities. But with the attention came scrutiny. Articles speculated about her relationship with Liam, suggesting favoritism, calling her a charity case turned success story. The comments online were cruel. Emma read them late one night until her hands shook. When Liam found her sitting by the window, eyes red from crying, he knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly, "do not read that noise. They do not know you. They think I used you," she whispered. "That I am just another name in your PR portfolio." His jaw tightened. "Then they are wrong, and I will prove it." She shook her head. "No, Liam, this time let me." The next morning, Emma called the magazine and requested to write a statement. In her own words, she explained that her art began long before she met Liam, that he only gave her the chance to believe it mattered. The honesty of her letter went viral, silencing much of the noise. When the next exhibition opened, the crowd that came was not curious about a billionaire's girlfriend. They came for Emma. As she walked through the hall, surrounded by her art, she spotted Liam standing in the back, watching quietly, his pride hidden behind that familiar calm. After the event, they stepped outside onto the balcony, the city glowing beneath them. "You did not have to defend me," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. "Because this was never about who saved who. It was about what we built from that mistake." He smiled faintly. "Then let me make one more." Before she could ask what he meant, he pulled a small velvet box from his coat. Her breath caught. Inside, instead of a ring, was a folded piece of paper, the napkin from their first real conversation. The one with the sketch of her coffee cup. On the back, new words were written in his handwriting. "Marry me, not because of who I am, but because of what we found when neither of us was pretending." Emma laughed through her tears. "You kept this all this time?" "Some things are worth keeping," he said, "even mistakes." She looked at him, her heart steady for the first time in a long time. "Then yes," she whispered, "but on one condition." "Anything," he said. "We keep living like we did before all this, with small dinners, honest talk, and no secrets." He nodded, slipping his hand into hers. "Deal." The city's skyline shimmered around them, wind carrying the faint hum of traffic and music from far below. Somewhere in that endless sound, their laughter joined in a soft, imperfect melody that somehow fit perfectly. For Emma and Liam, it was never about wealth or fame. It was about the courage to stay true when the world demanded something else. And in that truth, they found everything they had been missing: peace, love, and a promise that felt real. The following months were a test of everything Emma and Liam had promised each other. Fame came faster than either of them expected. Emma's art tours stretched from New York to San Francisco, and interviews filled her schedule. Liam, though proud, began to feel the weight of his own empire pulling him in the opposite direction. One evening, while Emma was in Los Angeles preparing for a new exhibit, Liam canceled another dinner meeting to catch her flight home. The Parker Group board was restless, investors worried about his sudden shift of focus. When he arrived at the airport, exhausted but determined, the headlines flashing on every screen stopped him cold. Billionaire CEO's fiancée walks out of her exhibit mid-show. The video clip played on repeat. Emma, pale and trembling, leaving a crowded gallery while flashes from cameras blinded her. He caught the next flight out. When he reached her hotel, she was sitting by the window, knees drawn close, the lights of the city shimmering in her eyes. "Emma," he said softly, "what happened?" She turned, her voice quiet but steady. "I overheard two curators arguing. They said the only reason my art sells is because I am your fiancé, that I am the Billionaire's charity project." Liam's heart sank. "You know that is not true." "I know," she said. "But I need them to know it too. I cannot keep creating if people think it is all you." He walked closer, taking her hand. "Then tell me what you need." She looked up, the decision already written across her face. "Time. Space. I need to do something on my own." His chest tightened, but he nodded. "If that is what it takes for you to believe in yourself completely, I will wait." Weeks turned into months. Emma traveled to small towns, painting murals, teaching kids, and avoiding the noise of fame. Her name began to appear again, this time without his attached. Liam followed quietly from afar, sending support through anonymous donations to the community art projects she led. One day, as she stood before a finished mural, a swirl of colors forming two intertwined silhouettes under the rain, she realized what she had been missing. It was never about independence or dependence. It was about choice. She wanted to share her life, not prove her worth. That night, she sent him a message. "I think I finally understand what you meant by building from mistakes. Can we start again?" When Liam saw it, he smiled for the first time in weeks. He did not reply right away. Instead, he boarded a red-eye flight to the coastal town where she was working. The next morning, as Emma stood near the mural, wiping paint from her hands, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw him. No suit, no cameras, just the man she had once mistaken for a stranger in the rain. "You came," she whispered. He nodded, eyes soft. "You asked me to once." "I'm just late by a few months." She laughed, tears glinting in the morning light. "You always did take your time." He stepped closer, slipping his paint-stained hand into hers. "Not anymore," he said. And under that bright sky, with colors still drying on the wall behind them, they finally stood side by side again, not as billionaire and artist, not as savior and saved, but as two imperfect souls who had chosen each other for all the right reasons. Emma and Liam spent the next few months rebuilding something quieter, but stronger than before. She returned to New York, not to the glossy galleries or flashing cameras, but to a small studio tucked above a bookstore where the scent of old paper mixed with paint. Liam helped her move in, carrying boxes while pretending not to notice how many times she laughed at his lack of balance. Their days became simple again. She painted, he worked. They met for late-night coffee or early morning walks in Central Park before the city woke. One afternoon, as golden sunlight poured through the wide windows, Emma placed the final stroke on a new canvas. It was a pair of hands reaching through the rain, almost touching. She looked at Liam and said, "Do you ever think about how it all started? The mistake, the rain, the wrong table." He smiled softly. "Every day. It was the best wrong turn I ever took." She laughed. "You and your poetic answers." But her laughter faded when she saw the look in his eyes, serious, tender, certain. "Emma," he began, "I used to think success meant control, that if I planned everything, nothing could go wrong. But then you showed up, and nothing went according to plan, yet everything felt right." He reached into his jacket pocket, and for a moment, she thought he might be holding that old napkin again. Instead, he pulled out a small, simple ring. No diamonds, no grandeur, just silver and sincerity. Her breath caught. "Liam," he took her hand, his voice steady. "We have already built a life out of mistakes and second chances. I do not want to wait for perfect moments anymore. I just want real ones with you." For a second, all the noise of the city below seemed to fade. Emma blinked away tears, her smile trembling. "Are you asking me what I think you are asking me?" "Yes," he said softly. "But this time, no contracts, no expectations, just us." The world slowed as she nodded. "Then yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and she laughed through her tears, resting her forehead against his. Outside, rain began to fall again, light and familiar, as if the city itself was remembering their first meeting. They stepped onto the small balcony, hand in hand, letting the raindrops cool their skin. Down on the street, a couple hurried past, sharing one umbrella, just as Emma and Liam once had. She looked up at him, smiling. "Do you think they know how much a mistake can change everything?" Liam squeezed her hand gently. "They will, someday." The rain fell harder, but neither of them moved. In that quiet storm, with paint drying on the walls behind them and a future unfolding ahead, they finally understood that love was never about perfection. It was about choosing each other again and again, even when life refused to follow the plan. 1 year later, the rain returned, just as it had the night they met. This time it fell gently over a rooftop garden overlooking the city, where strings of warm lights swayed in the breeze. Emma stood at the edge, her white dress brushing against the floor, the fabric simple yet radiant under the glow. Her art studio had flourished, not because of fame, but because her story, the story of the girl who sat at the wrong table, had touched hearts far beyond New York. She now ran community art programs funded by the Parker Foundation, though she refused to let anyone call them charity. "It is collaboration," she would always say. "Everyone brings color to someone else's world." Liam, now more relaxed than the world had ever seen him, watched her from across the garden, speaking quietly with the guests. There were no reporters, no investors, just close friends, family, and the people whose lives they had quietly helped along the way. As the music faded, he walked toward her, rain misting softly against their faces. "Do you remember what you said the night you thought I was just a driver?" he asked. Emma smiled, the memory flickering to life. "You are my ride, right?" he chuckled. "Seems like you were right. Still am." She leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "Only this time, I am not afraid of where we are going." He pulled her closer, whispering, "That is because we built the road together." The guests clapped as the first notes of their song began to play. They danced under the rain, laughter blending with the hum of the city below. Jenny, her old roommate, stood by the dessert table wiping a tear. "From a coffee shop to this," she said to herself, smiling. She finally got her happy ending. But Emma never thought of it as an ending. Later that night, after everyone had gone, she and Liam stood alone, the city lights shimmering around them. She picked up her old sketchbook from the table. It was worn, its corners bent, its pages filled with every chapter of their journey. On the first page, she had drawn that moment from a year ago, a girl in the rain and a man holding an umbrella. Underneath, in her careful handwriting, she had added one final line: "Mistakes are just beginnings in disguise." Liam looked over her shoulder, smiling at the words. "You know," he said, "we could frame that one." She shook her head, closing the book gently. "No, some things should just stay in motion." She tucked it under her arm and turned toward him. "Ready to go home?" "Always," he said, taking her hand. Together they walked through the rain, their reflections rippling across the puddles, no longer two strangers from different worlds, but partners who had learned that love, real love, is not found in perfection. It is built in the moments we almost get everything wrong. And as the city lights flickered behind them, one truth remained clear. Sometimes the best stories do not start with plans or promises. Sometimes they begin with a mistake, a question, and the courage to stay long enough for the answer. The rain kept falling over the cabin as the night deepened, wrapping the lake in a curtain of mist and sound. Inside, the fire crackled softly, casting warm light over the wooden walls and their tired faces. Adrian sat at the small table, staring at the flash drive he had risked everything to retrieve. Lena stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the lightning dance across the dark water. "You should sleep," she said quietly. "You have been up all night." He shook his head, his eyes never leaving the small device. "I cannot sleep knowing they could still come for us." She turned, stepping closer. "Adrian, you already have the truth. The video, the messages, it is enough. You can end this." He looked up at her, his voice low but filled with certainty. "Not until it is out there. If I stop now, they will bury it again. They always do." She knelt beside him, her hand brushing his arm. "Then what happens to us?" The question lingered in the air. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Adrian exhaled, his tone softening. "I do not know, but I know I cannot lose you." The words came out before he could stop them, and silence followed, heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, thunder rolled, echoing across the lake. Lena's eyes searched his face, trying to read the man behind the resolve. "You are not the man I met that night," she said quietly. "You were broken then." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you fixed me." She laughed softly, though her voice trembled. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying," he replied, his hand reaching for hers. You saved my life twice, once from the crash, and once from myself. Before she could answer, the sound of tires crunching on wet gravel cut through the quiet. Adrian froze. Lena turned toward the window, her breath catching. Headlights cut through the fog, approaching fast. They found us, she whispered. Adrian grabbed the flash drive, pocketed it, and turned to her. Stay behind me. What are you going to do? She asked, panic rising in her voice. Finish what I started, he said firmly. The door rattled as footsteps splashed through the mud outside. The fire flickered violently as wind swept in through the cracks. Lena's heartbeat thundered in her ears. A voice shouted from beyond the door. Dr. Hale, you cannot hide forever. Adrian's jaw tightened. Langston, he muttered. He glanced at Lena, his eyes steady. No matter what happens, you take this and run. He pressed the flash drive into her palm, closing her fingers around it. Promise me. She shook her head, tears forming. Not without you. Promise me, Lena? His voice cracked, desperate but gentle. She swallowed hard, then nodded. I promise. The door burst open with a crash, the storm howling behind the intruders. In that split second, lightning illuminated everything, the fear, the defiance, the unspoken love between them. The storm had arrived, and so had the reckoning they both knew was inevitable.